I was thinking I would call these the Sunday sit downs, and then I couldn't remember if that was like a thing on a television like NBC, CBS, ABC, something like that. But welcome to your affectionately known as Sunday sit down with Lisa. Tonight, we're going to build off of what our Teach Me Tuesday was about, which is assessment, and really just kind of pause for a moment and talk about what cue-based cares are, because I did get some questions about it and I feel like maybe I was confusing people. Honestly, I believe that cue-based cares can work for anyone. I've talked about this before, that we went to this place maybe, I don't know, time is weird, before COVID. So I would say more than 5 years ago, where we took our smallest babies and said, hey, we need to stop touching them. And so we need to space out our cares and do cares every 6 hours. And so we did that for a while and it seemed to be okay. But when you really started looking at the research and really seeing what was happening with your patients, maybe you realized that wasn't the best. And honestly, I think so much about my experience that I was very lucky and fortunate to have with two pregnancies, and knowing I did have more than two pregnancies, but two pregnancies that went to the point where I was feeling them and moving around. And babies don't lay in there. They're constantly moving around in that environment, and they're peeing in utero, and they're taking their little practice breaths, and they're doing all these different things. And yet I am like so proud of my swaddling skills and my ability to use a nest and a developmental positioning device to really get a baby kind of securely in their position. And so we would get them in there. A baby would desaturate or do something, and maybe we would go in and suction them and walk away. But in reality, what was probably happening, and what is probably happening, is the baby was just ready to move. And we had this idea that they needed to stay there for 6 hours. And so maybe we would suction them. And then at 6 hours, we're like, oh, it's time for your cares. Let's wake you up, change your position, and do your diaper and all of that. Well, maybe they peed or pooped in the between there and they didn't love laying in it. And that's actually why they were moving before. And so there is this push to do something called cue-based cares, which is you do the baby's cares when they tell you. And if you can learn to watch their cues, you can interpret that and do them sooner, and then maybe going no longer than 4 hours between cares, especially for skin breakdown. What I also love about cue-based cares is that it really makes care individualized. What I don't love about it as a NICU nurse is that I love a schedule. I love to know when the baby's due and what I'm doing and when I'm doing it and when the next baby's due. And it's also helpful for parents if they can only be there certain times of the day. But that also brings us back to the idea of cue-based or relational cues, which is we do their cares when their family is there. And if their family can only be there at 11, we shouldn't be like, oh, it's not their care time. It literally is like nails on a chalkboard when someone says, oh, it's not their care time. You can't do that to a family. I'm like, whoa. So neurodevelopmentally, maybe it's tricky, right? It does require us to be critical thinkers and to really think to ourselves, why is this baby moving right now? And if they're moving, what could I do in this time that would maybe limit what I would need to do in the future? So maybe that means I can do my respiratory assessment, my visual assessment, check my cap refill, change a diaper. Maybe that means, hey, they were kind of already fussy and I did have a blood gas due. So I went ahead and changed their position and suctioned them. And now I waited a period of time, let them recover, got my gas, and now we can do the rest of our cares. So it's kind of like putting all of those things together. But the biggest point I want to emphasize is that babies are best, right? They're healing, they're growing, their brains are growing when they're sleeping, when they're getting quality sleep. So we should not be waking them up, but we should be recognizing when they are awake. And I think that that is kind of what we were missing as a community for a few years, was this idea of, is the baby awake? Are they moving? Are they desaturating? Are they breathing? Is that telling us they're awake? Is that telling us they're uncomfortable? And so really kind of tuning into that idea of, if we can catch them in their awake windows, then we're going to give them better sleep in between. And the first time I was ever introduced to cue-based cares was actually around feeding. It was at the second hospital I worked at in Seattle, and they did cue-based cares and fed the babies on 3 hours. So, kind of that idea of what my reel was about today with like the dropping of the feed. And we really learned to watch the monitors and watch for 10% changes in heart rates or respiratory rates so that we could get in and do their cares. Also, before they escalated too much, especially as they got older, and to catch their oral feeding windows if it was kind of around there. And that idea that we love our 8-11-2-5, right? But what if the baby wants to eat at 7:30, 8:15? Right? So, kind of that idea of watching for their cues. All that to say, you're doing a great job. I'm proud of you. You're getting your assessments done. You're listening to your baby. You're following your unit's policy. But I'm just challenging you to think outside of that idea of it has to be every 3 hours. It has to be every 4 hours. It has to be every 6 hours. Into this idea of cue-based cares and what that really means for the baby and who is benefiting. And I love the idea of relation-based cares, making sure that we are doing things when the family is there and we never tell a family they can't do something because the baby's not due. I can totally understand if the baby's going back to sleep and the parents are going to be there for 12 hours. If your parents are going to visit for 1 hour that day, you do the cares when the parents are there because the babies are going to do best when they are being loved on by their caregivers. So we'll see where this goes. Maybe I'm going to turn these short videos into a long format YouTube situation. We'll see. They've got a lot of little things going on right now, but I hope you have a great Sunday. I don't know if you're cheering for the Buccaneers or the Commanders tonight. So far, kind of how I thought it was going to go with the playoffs is how it's going. Maybe you don't care about the NFL at all, but I hope you're having a great evening and that you have a great week.